on Mumbai. The 2022 IPCC report claims that Mumbai is one of the most vulnerable cities in the world, which is going to be subject to sea level rise and going to face a lot of calamities, to say the least. Not only is it subject to sea level rise, but with a burgeoning population, rampant construction, and desperate struggle for resources, as we all know, the city is bursting at its seams today. So we question whether it's finally time to pause and think about how stable is Mumbai's ecosystem, what are its ecological conflicts, and how can they be resolved? How do we continue to imagine Mumbai, this city, as the maximum city that it's so lovingly called? Our speakers and stakeholders are stakeholders that hail from diverse professions, practices and perspectives, and they will be discussing why Mumbai today is in a state of ecological crisis. That's not to say that people sitting in this room, you and me, are not stakeholders, because we are. And if the video says anything, it says that stakeholders go beyond people and beyond this room. So to deliberate on this crisis and the solutions that we need to work on together, please welcome our panelists. I will take the opportunity to introduce them. Bittu Sehgal, an honor to have you here. He is the founder. Bittu is the founder of the Sanctuary Nature Foundation, editor of Sanctuary Asia, and founder-editor of Sanctuary Club. He works with policymakers, social workers, economists, and scientists at the tri-junction of biodiversity, climate change, and economics. He was closely involved with the Project Tiger since its inception in the 70s, produced 30 wildlife documentaries, wrote on conservation issues in many publications, and he served on a range of government and non-government organization and boards and committees in the last 30 years. He has been our voice for a long time and continues to do so. Our next panelist, Rahul Kadri, a very warm welcome. Rahul is a partner and principal architect at IMK Architects. With over 6 decades of experience and 150 projects in India and overseas, he has expertise in various segments ranging from healthcare, hospitality, education, institution, to self-redevelopment and residential townships. He is a noted expert on subjects like urban development and policy-making, public transport systems, housing and slum redevelopment, ecological planning, and new age healthcare design. Rahul has also been an active advocate for the city of Mumbai, if I may say so. So thank you so much for being here. And this session is moderated by Karthik Ganesan. Karthik is Fellow and Director, Research Coordination at CEEW. He has a bird's-eye view of the Council's ongoing and planned research and ensures cross-team coherence for the Council's research direction and imperatives. He is an active researcher with the power sector and air pollution work programs. He is also an internal advisor across research teams, creates institutional platforms that spur innovation, and in partnership with other senior researchers, he continues to strengthen CEEW's foundation for world-class research. A very warm welcome, Karthik, and thank you for moderating this for us. Before we begin, just a small note, and we mentioned this earlier in the day, is that we would really like for the audience to interact and to engage with our panelists today. And I say this with Karthik's permission, that if you have any comments or questions in the middle of the panel and during the discussion, please feel free to raise your hands. Karthik will try and pull you in as much as he can and try to weave your comments and questions into the conversation. We've got a great panel, and we're hoping that this can provide a lot of food for thought and inspiration for all of us. So thank you all for being here.
Thank you, Mrinalini, for the kind introduction. And it's an honor to be sort of here on this, sharing the stage with Bittu and Rahul, who are so well known for all the work that they do for the city and for the country as a whole. I want to start this conversation by first saying that, apart from the fact that I'm a researcher at an organization that sort of works at the policy level, I'm the father to an 8-year-old who was born at 26 and a half weeks. So she's what is termed as extreme premature, right? She did not have a lung when she actually came out. But she's a miracle of science in the sense that today she's a healthy 8-year-old. And we started, I started the air quality work program pretty much at CW when I realized that, I'm bringing her into a world where even as a normal human being, there's so much challenges. Our lungs are designed basically to actually take a lot of this abuse, but it's supposed to help you over the course of your 80 years. But what we're actually doing today is that on account of this constant onslaught that the environment is putting in your lungs, it's very likely that a lot of us who are sitting here, by the time we are in our mid 40s and 50s, especially if you're from places like where I am, which is Delhi, right? You will start having a lot of problems. So, I think it's important for us to, I think, understand that the choices that we've made to live in these cities and to sort of go about our daily vocations, oblivious to the long-term implications just for ourselves. As much as the film was about what we're doing to Mother Earth, it's equally about what you're doing to yourself. And I think that's the spirit in which we want to sort of engage in this, because as Bittu will agree, Mother Earth will take care of herself. She is 4 billion years old. She will live well beyond the few million years that humanity has been around or will be around, and things will start again. It's really about how do we make this a better place for ourselves. It's to also ensure that we are able to have a conversation which leaves all of you with a sense of optimism that there's something that you can do to change the way things are and things will be if we don't do anything. So in that spirit, I'll sort of move on to you, Bittu, straight away. You want to grab your mic. So, you've talked about how it's, we need to ensure that there isn't this sense of ecological grief that's passed on to this generation, to the next generation, and I am constantly wary of that, in the way I ask my daughter to mask up every time she's outside, because, especially during the season, because nobody else does it. But this constant onslaught that, you need to do all these things as a precaution, and that this is how things are worsening, etc., can sort of start playing on your mind. I think Greta has also been sort of accused of, doing that. I mean, whether there is some truth to it or not is different. But how do you propose that we sort of engage, or at least let younger people engage in that debate in a way that they are able to contribute to the outcomes?
Sure. First, hi, and let me tell you this, that I want to tell you two things. There are only two political parties in the whole world. One is the Buddha party and one is the Bacha party. You guys are part of the Bacha party. That's the first thing I want to tell you. The second thing I want to tell you is I owe you guys a deep, real apology. I was born in 1947. I even got kissed by Lady Mountbatten when I was 1 day old. And we were born into a free country. My biggest problem was I was being trained to be an opening bat and wicketkeeper for India's test matches, and my father said no. And I lived that trauma for 2 or 3 years. I wish such traumas upon you guys. May your traumas be of that nature and not the kind that we are bequeathing to you. But having said that now, if you pick up your phones, whether you pick them up now or later, I mean, just understand that like a cut on your hand or a bruise on your knee, it fixes itself. It fixes itself. You get onto the net and you'll find that the whole planet is exactly the same thing. It can fix itself. You can put a little, normally water should do it, but you can put an antibiotic and you can do this and that and the other. But even the doctors, even when you go in for a transplant, knows that when you've done something, it will fix itself. It depends upon nature to do what nature was designed to do so many billion years ago. So the question now is that we have sent to you, we have given you this still very exquisite planet. What you didn't see because of the chairs here is that every one of those faces was murdered. Those people were looking to protect the environment. So first of all, don't believe that protecting the planet is not a matter of life and death. It is figuratively and literally a matter of life and death. But you talked about ecological grief. Please understand this one thing, that at COP28, I would call it COP-out 28, right? Really, if you look at it, what they're doing is they're just delaying, they're trying to export to you the problem of solving the issues, because they still want to keep putting more carbon into the atmosphere. So I will say to you that everything will be okay. It will work out. At this point in time, nature's asking us to sit down and kneel in prayer. It's going to ask us to kneel in subjugation. If we don't understand that nature doesn't give us any judgments at all. Rahul is a good guy, Bittu is a good guy, he's a horrible guy, he's the guy who's doing all the things. It doesn't tell you that. It only gives you warnings and then it gives you consequences. And I can tell you this, you cannot speed, there's no fast forward speed on this. It's taken us 200, 300 years to cause the problem. It's not going to get solved in 5 days. And long before us, Darwin said something which is what I would have put up a picture of Darwin up in Dubai. And what he said was, it's not the strongest, it's not the most intelligent, it's the most adaptable that will survive. He was talking about species. I'm talking about corporates, I'm talking about species, I'm talking about you guys, I'm talking about environmentalists, everybody. If we don't adapt, then we'll get punished. And in the end, the biosphere is king. Everything, human rights, food security, water security, economics, health, happiness, all that depends on a healthy biosphere, and we can carry on talking as we go along. But you have to promise me one thing. The one thing that you do not have the luxury to do, which I did, I had the luxury to sit back over there and play cricket when I could and do this and that and the other. And I left the business of running this planet to other people, so whatever they do, I'll adapt. You have to get involved, but don't have to do the same thing. You get involved to do what makes you happy and what you're good at. And don't overreach. Don't try to overstretch. You listen to this wonderful friend of mine over here, and I can tell you, he's way ahead of the others. Every building will become a climate control device by the time you are half my age, all right? And I think let's go on and let's see where we go.
Thank you, Bittu, for setting the stage. And and talking about adaptation, we were to actually have yet another speaker. Unfortunately, couldn't join us, and it reminded me of the Hiranandani complex. To this date, when when that entire complex started coming up in the early 2000s, I think is when it was kind of opened. At least my memory of it, it was possibly a little earlier, maybe in bits and bobs. It was to this date, when we refer to sort of like these gated societies, we sort of say like the Hiranandani complex. It seemed like the self-contained city, right, that basically allows you to do everything. And it was talked of in a good way. And in the morning, the conversation that we had with Rahul, he talked of how it's become an adaptation tool where you sort of, are trying to control what's actually happening within the vicinity of where you live, so that, everything there is manicured to suit your sensibilities and senses, and doesn't really let you think about what's actually happening on the immediate outside of it, right? And how long can you continue living like that? Because at the end of the day, if everybody chose to sort of have that sort of setup, it's not going to work out. So, as an architect, who sort of advises, well, whether it's individuals, whether it's cities, Rahul, what do you think about this where we're seeing these gated communities, and this sort of bubbles that we're sort of really creating around ourselves to protect ourselves from there? Is that a good adaptation strategy? Rahul seemed to allude that there is an element of that that's needed, right, but not in the way that's currently sort of playing out. Your thoughts on, how that's playing out,
Firstly, thank you and thank the organizers. And it's always such a pleasure to listen to this eloquent man. And one feels a little odd to talk after him, because just the beauty with which he illustrates his points is amazing. Sorry, coming back to what you're saying. Well, as an architect and urban planner, I think it's a cop-out each time. And we've been asked to design a number of these. And it usually centers around security, as we know. So that becomes the basis that, we want security, and we don't want the others, whoever the others are, to come in to where we live. So this social exclusion, and I think it really comes from people not understanding what a city is. And that if you don't have, so for a city to be thriving, the complexity of what needs to happen on those streets can really be designed. So my short answer is that it's a cop out, and it's also a failure of our planning processes. And before we get into bashing of the government,
Yep.
uh, I feel the only way for us to go forward is to avoid this bias, this characterization bias that we all have, and to be more friendly. This characterization bias as, there's this they who don't know and we know. In the universal mind, there are different points of view and different things happen. And quantum physics talks about it's only when you take a stand does the stand become real. So I feel going forward, see, building a city, designing a city, policy planning, we need to understand these are so highly complex. They're not simple. They're not simple things. So the first thing I feel is very simple. Just be more friendly with whoever you engage with, especially people in the government. I engage with them some, not a whole lot, and I find most of them are like us. They have families, they have kids, aspirations, and they want the same good that we want. But if we're going to label them and, make it them versus us, we're not going to be able to go forward. So in all our work, that's what we try to do is build connections, right? Inclusiveness. When we talk about inclusiveness, it's that. And so I feel, one, understand that it's far more complex.
Yep.
The laws forbid the bureaucracy from doing a lot of things, a lot of reform that needs to happen in making cities inclusive, environmentally sustainable, actually lie in our law books. So till we don't, we can't overlay things without going into the root of what is the structure, what is governing this. So that governance part of it needs to be dealt with. So I think that's a long,
Got it. No,
convoluted
absolutely.
answer.
You've hit on a right point, and I'm going to come right back to you, Rahul. Right? I was just discussing this with Bittu, which is the price that we pay for the democracy that we enjoy is actually eternal vigilance, right? Which is to say that unless you are actively involved in the decisions that are made on your behalf, and that's just not limiting it to the vote that you cast for the general election or for the state election or for even the MLC election, right? And you're actively involved in the decisions about, okay, this road's going to come up. There's actually a hearing around, whether that's legit or not. You have to participate in that. If you let somebody else make that decision, and I think that's what you're alluding to, which is the participation. So in that regard, what I want to ask was, there was a very nice and progressive plan that was put forward for Mumbai, for a carbon neutral Mumbai. Alongside, there was a lot of sustainability elements that were put in there. And one of them, for instance, was on, a waste management that was decentralized. Right, this city generates 11,000 tons of waste on a daily basis, and according to research, between 50 and 70% of it just doesn't even get managed in any scientific manner. Right, goes to landfills which are basically overflowing. And as you said, you've got to be kind to, for instance, the people who are working in this. It's not the problem that they aren't picking it up so much as we aren't aiding them in arriving at solutions that are less onerous. So what do you think will sort of drive this change in the way people think about, for instance, decentralized waste management, right? I mean, you're part of RWAs where presumably, you have conversations around this issue, and you probably also think about solutions, in the various places that you discuss it, Rahul. So, and what do you see as the response to that? Because ultimately, that's what will drive discussion, right?
So I also feel that we need to somehow move away from fear-based thinking. Fear motivates to some extent, but as when the danger is not there anymore, we go back to our old ways. So I feel maybe, and I know Bittu talks about this a lot, and he's painted some lovely pictures, in my head at least, about engaging with beauty and the beauty of recycling, and understanding how that happens and how magic. He said nature heals itself, waste converts itself to manure. So, kind of talking about that aspect of the wonder of it and engaging people through the wonder, so that in every home they look forward to that wonder. So using curiosity, using beauty, using these tools rather than fear.
Yeah.
I think fear is overused.
Right.
And also, the way the BMC tried to do it, wherein ALMs were formed, and then if you you segregate your waste, you'll have a single window clearance, all of that. That seemed good. It's just that I don't think it wasn't managed well. But I just feel if we approach these things with more positivity,
Right.
it'll hopefully, we have more fertile parts of our brain, I think, that look forward to beauty.
Right, absolutely. It's a great point that you're making. For those of you wondering what's playing in the background, that's actually it's on loop. It's basically Ambojwadi, which is basically northwest of Mumbai, and it shows you the juxtaposition of a community that lives there, which is obviously susceptible to the vagaries of nature in a way that perhaps many other parts of Mumbai aren't. That's a constant sight, and they basically look on to this, right? So, Bittu, talking to this particular, you spoke about COP, and you spoke about in some sense, the irresponsible, exuberance, right, or the irrational exuberance, that optimism, right, that comes with some of these conferences, and what you actually need is some pessimism, guarding, a mindful pessimism or a skepticism around some of these. So how do you propose that we sort of engage with this issue in a way that we are sort of, nudging, action along these lines? There are, of course, I think pathways have been laid out, right? The city, for instance, plans to improve public transport access, last mile connectivity, and a range of things. But over and above that, how do you ensure that there's this, this mindful skepticism around what actions are happening, and, how do we deal with it?
So it's, I'm condemned to be a truth teller. And as a truth teller, what I will say to you is that what we are seeing around us right now, taking place in Dubai, for instance, is irresponsible optimism. Don't worry, la 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 la, you kids, everything will be all right. Of course, everything will be all right. It can be all right, but only if you do the right thing. If you get cut and you start putting all manner of infections in your cut, it's not going to heal. So what I'm suggesting to you guys at your age, you're going to take over this world, that don't be irresponsibly optimistic. There is a better way to do it, which is hopeful pessimism. That there is something called a disaster management plan. You want to build a port, you want to build a building, you want to build a road, you want to do anything. Anything to do with any engineering, you have to have the equivalent of a disaster management plan. And the disaster management plan has a very straightforward dhacha. It says, look, prepare for the worst, hope for the best, and you will have to accept what comes. Now, if you don't prepare for the worst and say, ye to hone wala nahi hai, और फिर हो गया तो क्या होगा? Right now, Rahul, when you talk in terms of category 1, category 2, category 3, category 4, category 5 cyclones, what is that basis? One is the wind speed, and the 2 is the frequency. So if category 5 is once in 100 years, and at a wind speed of, let's say, 70 miles or 100 miles or 150 kilometers, we are seeing 3 of those happen in the last 4 years. So what happens to, that's what I would call now, people who go back to use the old data are being irresponsibly optimistic. And in your case, what you have to do is you have to figure out ये क्यों हो रहा है? Why is this happening? So here is the bottom line. If you don't understand what the problem is, you will never find a solution. The atmosphere is what? About 60 kilometers thick. Now, for the last 200 years, we've been shoving carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, and it's almost full. It's like a kachra ka dabba. Abhi bhar ke girne wala hai. So what you have to do is find out not only not to put up more carbon into that kachra ka dabba, but how to bring it down. And here is where the hopeful pessimism comes in, because you know there's a problem and you know there's a solution. I mean, I don't know if that's a real plant or not a real plant, but if it's a real plant, which I think it is, we're in Godrej. So what will happen is that that plant is feeding you. May I just ask you to take 20 seconds, shut your eyes, just shut your eyes and take 3 deep breaths. That, in a sense, calms you down, but that was not the intent. The intent was to present before you a miracle. Because every time you breathe, that plant gave you the oxygen that you needed, and every time you breathed out, you fed the plant. That is homeostasis at work. When you get a fever, what happens? You start sweating and the body is trying to make it cool. When you feel very cold, you start shivering, and that keeps you warm. The whole planet is built like that. The entire planet, everything from the soil to the sea to the river to the sky to every creature, everything is made to fix itself. Your job is to understand it. Do not accept on face value what I'm saying. That's why I talked about the internet. You have a tool in your hands which I never had when I was your age. Do what you do because you're internally convinced, and be internally convinced that we can get out of this crisis. And the biosphere is the foundation on which everything is built. So anybody now looking to hurt that biosphere is not just hurting a tree or an animal or a bird or an insect or something like that. That's hurting the possibility of life continuing the way it would be, so be comfortable. You talked of your lungs. Your lungs are not outside your body. Your lungs are inside your body, but they are outside because everything that you breathe in is touching your lungs. And yet, what you spoke of, the miracle, that still the body has a way of taking those pollutants and passing it out. Trust in nature, trust in its ability to heal itself. Don't try to rush that. Explore what is happening, find out the causes. I promise you that in next to no time, you'll find that the solution, you don't have to look at the end post, you have to look at the direction. You've all gone through the pandemic, you've seen what happened. I can tell you, I've never seen the Yamuna, I've never been able to see 5 feet down into the Yamuna. It came back. Bombay's skies I thought were blue in the monsoon, but right now, they're not. But during the pandemic, oh my God, they were bluer than my shirt. I mean, come on. It can fix itself. Everything can fix itself. Just learn to trust in nature and try to see that you can't all do everything. Do what you can do. Don't overreach. Don't overbite. Don't overtrust. Don't undertrust. Because even now, as I'm talking, I have no way of fixing even a light bulb over here. I will have to go back to the same people who are doing the wrong thing and saying, look, this is not the right way, that's the right way, can you find out? Once you do that, once you learn how to trust, once you elect the right people, once you create an element of trust between generations, I promise you, the maintenance engineers of this planet are not you and me. They're a butterfly, they're a bird, they're a bee, they're a monkey. And now if you were 12 years old, which is my constituency, I'd say, you know something? When an elephant goes out, he takes a huge piece of shit and he drops it down. And the rest of the forest says, buffet, breakfast, So there come the beetles, there come the this, there come the this. There is nothing, there is no creature on earth that has the technology to waste. Yeah. It cannot produce waste, and that is your lifeline. Understand that the earth, the biosphere, does not know how to waste, and that it can fix itself. And the rest of it you leave to an architect like him, because he will be building, and people like him will be building climate control devices, and you're going to have a wonderful life. But you've got to know who your friends are, and nature is your first, your middle, and your last friend.
Thank you, Bittu, for instilling that sense of optimism. And I think in terms of how to just look forward to, the beauty of nature. Rahul, you want to sort of, maybe
Yeah.
elaborate on that? Yeah.
So, it says expect the worst. I just want to elaborate on that. Urbanization is happening, will happen. India is going to move from 70% of the people living in the rural to 70% living in the city. And that's a disaster waiting to happen. And that will happen. That's a movement that happens in all the countries. So, in a sense, it's only going to get worse. Mumbai is only going to get worse, right? So that's what Bittu is talking about. It's like prepare for the worst. So how do we prepare for this? How do we prepare for the 110 million people in our state? 22 million of them live here. If you're saying it's going to be the other way around, and now 70% are going to live in the cities, so where are they going to live? And what are we doing in terms of policy? Where are we encouraging growth? In our last the master plan, we've made FSI 3 and 4 times. So we want to increase the density. So the policy planners, etc., saying they're looking at it in terms of fiscal terms, that prices are so high because the supply is low. Increase the supply, prices will come down. So economics of the 101. But what will that do to the physical space? Where will the water come from? Water is already a problem. Where will the water come? If there's a disaster, sea level rise, what will happen? So looking at disaster management and planning for the worst, I think we need to plan as a state rather than a city, and look at encouraging cities which have the potential to grow more, where there's water available, resources available, having them grow more, and actually putting a brake on Bombay. Actually, the expense, the cost of it is an excellent brake. So we shouldn't change that. Let that be. Let it be expensive. Maybe the Trans-Harbour link will change things, but the government is looking at a megapolis around Bombay, which again is a disaster waiting to happen, because everything is being concentrated in one region. So regional planning or planning of the state is very important, and that's not something the state thinks about at all. There is no mechanism for them to think about that. So that's one. And the other one is that in our areas, we know what we need. So this is something I've been talking about a fair amount, that, as you said, if we don't participate in a democracy, and a democracy is, someone said it is war. It is a constant fight for resources and for allocating resources, right? And if citizens don't challenge where the resources are going to be put, they'll be put where it's easiest for them to put, like the coastal road. It was the easiest thing for them to do is build the coastal road. So resources will be taken away from nature and deployed where it's simplest. But it's only people in a neighborhood that know what they need. So in the next elections, which are coming up for the state and the city, when the corporators come to you asking for your votes, ask for participatory planning. That are you going to give out 30%, I mean, specifically ask for this. 30% of the capital budget needs to be decided by the neighborhood, by the citizens. And so that allocation is done by the citizens because the citizens know what they want more than anybody else. So it's a very specific ask. Ask the corporators when they come and ask for your vote. Get it put in the manifesto that this is what they will do if they come to power. They will increase democracy. Presently, it's opaque, right? We really don't know how the budget making process happens, where money is allocated, what it is. And that's not, so we need to agitate to be included, our voices be heard.
Absolutely.
In this.
Absolutely.
So I was just coming to the participatory thing and your disaster management, because a huge disaster waiting to happen.
That's a fantastic point that you make, and I know Bombay's sort of memory of the worst floods possibly is 2005. I come from Chennai. I mean, originally I'm from Chennai. Unfortunately, I have to live in this really terrible place called Delhi. But, we've had 2 floods in the span of 8 years, which literally are rivaling each other, different localities impacted. And you won't believe it, the kind of solutions that you see to what people are experiencing is literally jacking up your houses in areas which are in low-lying, riverbeds or lake beds. That's a solution that somebody does because he or she's already invested the crores or the lakhs in building it, and they invest another 10 crores, and that's an industry now. My state gave the whole country the industry of groundwater drilling. Every tanker that you see that's drilling is possibly from Tamil Nadu. We're now giving it yet another industry, which is, enabling buildings to be jacked up so that in the event that there's really poor planning and that, you're in a locality, that's not the solution that we want, right? That's sort of retrograde, where, you're sort of putting more and more into the problems that you've created as opposed to addressing the solutions. So, Bittu, coming to you, right? So you talked about the older generation and what they've done, and it also feels like a lot of the wealth that has been created, right, for the current generation and for the older generation came from a certain economic order, right? Came from an economic paradigm. But what we're asking also to do when you ask everybody to sort of rethink is also to sort of, think of what that new economic paradigm is. Unfortunately, it's not something that's in their hands. Living in a city like Delhi, I'm just not able to, I'm paralyzed by the thought of leaving the city because I'm not sure what will I do in a different city. How is that city going to be different? So how do we give everybody the agency to make this decision, right? You talked about you need to have newer cities come up. Research from organizations like WRI suggested that a lot of the urbanizations actually happened around existing urban clusters, and that's the problem. So it links back to what is it that we are sort of promoting as as an economy. So how do you change that bit? I mean, I know you're a naturalist, you don't speak to the economy, right? But then how do you then put it in yourself that I need to think of a different way of making a living, right? Being alive, being sensible, and being happy.
Let's put it like this. There's a very simple thing. You ask the wrong question, you'll get the wrong answer. You have the wrong ambition, you're going to get the wrong result. So what is my ambition for you guys? I have only one ambition. I have 2 daughters and I have 3 grandsons, and I have only one ambition for them. I want them to be safe and I want them to be happy. I do not have another third ambition for them. And in order to do that, they need a few things. They need to breathe air that doesn't corrode their lungs. They need to drink water that does not absolutely poison them. They need to eat food that is nutritious and not necessarily packed in the same toxic material that is going to be causing my water to be spoiled. So if you know that this is what I want clean air. If I want clean air, and as you guys will have to do, and you have an advantage and a disadvantage. The disadvantage is we've handicapped you by spoiling a lot of things. The advantage is that the proof that they were asking of me 30 years ago is there in their face right now. It's in Chennai, it's here, it's in the air. So what I would ask you to do is to look at every development plan that's being made, use your vote and use your mind, and say, for instance, will this give me cleaner air or will this give me dirtier air? So you talk in terms of a coastal road. Fine, in their wisdom, they built a coastal road, but what happened with Methi? I've been on the ministry's disaster management plan and infrastructure committees for 20 years. And all that we said when they wanted to build the Bandra, Nariman Point sea link was that what happens if it rains on this side? You'll build all these things on this side. You'll build a swimming pool. So Methi River killed 1,000 plus people. We lost some many thousands of crores of rupees. And after the Methi River took place, some guy came across and said, why are the Bandra people not getting this advantage? Why do they have to go all over? So they took the Mahim Creek. I am dwelling on this because you must know what is it that you want, and in order to get it, what do you have to do, what do you not have to do. The Mahim Creek, it must have been 300 or 400 meters wide, and that's how all the water from the Tulsi and the Bihar and Powai lakes and all that, when it rained, it went out into the Mahim Bay. Then we built the Mahim Dam. We call it the Mahim Causeway. It's come down to 30, 40 meters. After the Methi River, they made it even tighter. So this is your problem today. Just like if you, I did this at a meeting and I wasn't very popular for it. I said, if I gave you guys 3 bottles of beer and I shut the bathroom door, there's going to be a very smelly room, So if you cut off the drainages, if you try to build too many buildings, FSI, floor space index, if you try to get it into 3 and 4 and 5, and you don't have the way to get rid of your stuff, so this is your future. Ask the right questions, but do it politely. I agree with him. Fighting is not going to solve the problem now. I had to fight 30 years ago. Today, you guys have to look at the solution and say, protecting the environment is good long-term economics. We cannot wish economics away. We have to work with economists, we'll have to work with engineers, we'll have to work with chemists, we'll have to work with the medical profession. I would like to see that the environmentalists of tomorrow would waver between, I would say, mothers, I would say pediatricians, and I would say on the other bench, I would put the insurance guys, the guys who are going to risk calculate. You cannot risk calculate in a world where the climate does not allow you to predict when to sow, when to reap, when to put your tarpaulins up, when not to put them up. Study a little more. Understand that you want stability, you don't want growth. Just examine for yourself what you want really from your life, and the world will conspire to give it to you. It's not, last thing I'll say on this front is, please don't listen to those people who say it's going to cost you $10 trillion to repair the world. The problem is not how much we're going to have to spend to repair it. It's how much we should not spend to destroy it. Because the world will repair itself. Everything will repair itself. But it takes time. It takes a certain degree of courage. And it takes for you not to imagine that you're going to do everything. And it certainly doesn't mean, "Arey yaar, ye to hone wala hai, to main kya karu yaar, jao, jahannam mein jao." It doesn't work like that. Get involved. Be happy. And the Dalai Lama's one advice which saved my life, be happy every day of your life. It is your right. You have a duty to be happy. So whether it's reading poetry or whether it's going out to fight a court case or whether it's going out and talking to children, your happiness is infectious. Be happy. The world will fix itself. But you may have to take a little few steps here and there to stop people from doing the obviously wrong thing.
Thank you, Bittu. Obviously, he's been the bright spark in this entire discussion, right? I think both Rahul and I have been exchanging sort of talks around how we should do things very differently. Bittu sort of just asking you to just follow your heart and be happy. But on that note, I see we've got about a little over 10 minutes. And Mrinalini did say that, we want to entertain more questions from the lot of you because, you may have a lot of questions that you probably want answered from either Rahul or Bittu. So I want to maybe throw the floor open a little bit now to hear. Even if it's as absurd as it might sound, don't hold back. There'll be a microphone that comes in. Let's collect a few and see whether there are common threads and then try and respond to them. Just a quick name and your question, as brief as possible. Yeah. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Akhilesh and I'm an architect. So I won't touch the major part like all you guys talk about. I just want to focus on the architecture aspect. So I want to know, like a suggestion from you guys, how do we deal with the capitalism part of sustainability? When it comes to, let's say, I'm building a house or I'm building a building, and the developer says, this is sustainable, everything is fine in schematic design, but when it comes to reality, while doing the quotations or finding the right cost, because of the capitalism, because of the cost, they try to like, no, you shouldn't, like it's very expensive, we can't do this. So how do you deal with this kind of scenarios when they arrive in the
Okay.
practice?
I had asked a very similar question, I think, to Rahul in the morning. I don't know whether you were there, but he seemed to respond differently. I'll tell you what that was. The next question, gentleman here, please, in the black. Can somebody hand a mic here?
Can we get a mic
Yeah.
right there?
Yeah, hi, my name is Samir Sheikh. I'm an architect. My name is Samir Sheikh. I'm an architect and urban designer. My question is to both Rahul and Bittu, and both of you can answer individually. We've heard about so many ecological problems, especially about Mumbai. What, according to you, is the single biggest ecological problem that Bombay is facing currently? And what would your solution be for that?
It's a loaded question. Is that it? Okay, great. Thank you for keeping it
that's it.
short, but obviously it was large enough for them to maybe chew on for many hours. But the question that I think the first gentleman asked was around, it feels like sustainability choices are inherently more expensive. Rahul in the morning said it's not necessarily the case. We're actually able to sort of match government, quotations and, and their price terms much better with more sustainable design and materials. So perhaps he's asking the same question. You may want to answer it.
No, so short answer is it's not more expensive. There may be a few features which you want to add which cost money, but the way we have worked, that's not been the case. And it's really about, so if it's working with a developer, then really the question comes, the developer sells to somebody, right? So clarifying with the developer, what will your customer really want and value, and will they pay for this if this is there, and training their marketing team to be able to market the idea that these are the sustainability features we have, and we've found that it usually works. Firstly, it doesn't cost more, maybe very slightly more, and those features we can very easily sell to a developer. About the single, I think probably the single most is the air we breathe, right? Because that's something that's happening all the time. So I'd say that's a short answer. Air.
Great.
Quality of air.
Thanks, Rahul, for keeping it succinct. Bittu, did you have anything?
I think the single largest ecological problem is that each of us wants too much more than can be given to us by the biosphere. It's like your heart. Everything is demand and supply. Your heart wants a certain amount, it can handle a certain amount of blood and pump blood. But if you try to narrow your arteries and you still try to do the same thing, you're going to have a heart attack. So we have to control what we want. Our ambitions, all of us, it goes into things like consumerism and things like this, but we don't have to sit over there with camel hair jackets and think, unless I'm suffering, I'm not going to be able to do something for the environment.
Yeah.
You have to be happy, and you have to understand that your happiness will not come from things. It comes from relationships, it comes from music, it comes from art, it comes from culture. It comes from, as he said, doing something nice for somebody else. If we do those things, you'll see a sea change. And don't think that, I will do it, but that guy won't do it. At some point, the change is not a V-turn, it's a U-turn. You're already on the U, because the proof of the pudding is now there. You can taste it. You will solve the problem. You have to want less, and you have to be happier, but find out what makes you happy.
Thank you, Bittu. I think becoming a parent is also a good thing, by the way. That's the one way I think you can also realize. I mean, it's not for everybody, but I'm just saying personally, the moment you start realizing that there is another person that you have to actually leave on this planet, you start inherently, I think, making different choices. For those of you who are considering that, that's a very great way of, sort of internalizing that the world is not just for you, it's for the next generation as well, and you start caring more. We have 2 more hands up. I think I see one gentleman there and the lady here.
And I have a comment.
Sorry, you want to come in?
No, whenever.
After, sure. We've got 5 minutes more, so keep it quick. Yeah.
Sure. So my name is Charvi. I'm a corporate sustainability strategist in a MNC. So I personally completely agree with whatever you're saying, but usually how we work in corporates tends out to be completely different. And I just want to understand what would be your one piece of advice for corporates when they make these sort of strategies, sustainability related strategies, and have you come across any initiatives by corporates which you felt that they actually did something good?
Got it. She wants free consulting advice. Okay,
Yes.
great. That's a good one. The gentleman there, yeah.
Hi, I'm Gaurav from Bomb Design Studio. I've got 2 comments and 1 question.
Can I avoid the question because we've got 4 minutes? So if you can, just the question, please.
Sure.
We'll have the comments later.
Sure. All of the above that we were discussing, we are sitting with the top 5% of India. And our solutions require inclusivity of the 95%, where the 95% are struggling to make ends meet. How do we get design more inclusive? In fact, the videos right behind you were of the 95%,
Correct.
not of the 5%.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, yeah, thank you for posing that question. That was indeed the elephant in the room. There's a reason why we couldn't have that. We'll explain that in person. But one more question, and then we'll probably have to wrap up, so we'll answer those. Can we have a lady, if it's okay? But okay, the gentleman here. All right. Yeah.
Hi everyone. My name is Pranjal.
Yeah.
So I noted a few points where Rahul said that urbanization will eventually happen, and we'll need to plan cities where there are plenty of resources available. But I'm an outsider, but have been living here for 7 years now, and I've observed few things. One of those is that urbanization has expanded to estates where there are no resources available, and what they have done that they are sharing resources with the cities or the estate where there are plenty of resources. So this sharing of resources have made some disturbances in the demographics. So I want to get on an idea from you. And secondly, the cities, the buildings and the estates that are going into redevelopment do not have any rainwater harvesting plants or any sorts of that. I'm not an expert on that, but would like an idea and opinion from you as well.
You're talking more about migration and how that's adding to the...
Exactly.
Exactly. So he's talking about the migration from an Orissa or
as
West
well as
Bengal.
on the rainwater harvesting.
And the other one. Okay, great. So I think there's a question on, okay, how do we address the equity challenge? Then there's the corporate side. What can a company do? So maybe, pithy advice for this one. I will let Rahul and you, of course, answer.
So whenever we do any session with corporates, I always ask the question, as Bittu is saying, I first want to define with them how much will be enough for you. That's because we don't want it to be an unlimited. So let's define the problem, and even with the developer, we say, how much profit do you want? Let's define that in the beginning. It's elephant in the room. Let's talk about it. It should not be an endless thing. हमें और भी चाहिए through the process. So define that okay, and that applies to our lives. Bittu saying is how much is enough, right? So even with corporates, that's the starting point. How much is enough, right? So once you have that, then you can build the strategies or question that. Is that something you can achieve, can't achieve? So building expectations or managing expectations is one way. I think what we are talking here is about setting policy and democracy and getting processes and procedures in place where we can hear multiple voices, right? So that is really the heart of this, right? So how do we get democracy and how do we get everybody's voice heard? So when you talk about neighborhoods, you're talking about neighborhoods in all communities, right? What do they really want, and are they getting the resources that they need because they have a right to? So it's about putting in place a process to get that. Yeah. What was his question? About rainwater harvesting is mandated, boss. It's a law. You have to do it. Then there was another one, rainwater harvesting and migration. Migration is going to happen. So, but that's something we know is going to happen, and therefore need to plan for it, right? We don't plan for it. Um, so, for the first time in the history of the planet, you don't need to go to an office. We learned that in the pandemic. So, I see a glimmer that maybe we can decentralize in a different way. Maybe, I'm seeing a glimmer of that, that technology may enable us to live wherever we want and contribute and earn our living from being wherever we want.
And
so that may not happen, that's a hope. But for migration, we need to plan. We need to not worsen the problem by getting people to places like Bombay, Delhi, Chennai, building sensibly in places which won't flood, etc. So yeah, we have to plan for it.
Correct. And pass all the problem on to Goa.
You cannot,
I think, right?
you cannot say that I don't want someone from
Correct. Absolutely.
to come here or Bihar to come here or whatever. That's not a solution.
Bittu, I think it's apt that you have the final word. I just want to say this before Bittu closes off with his response. I think the question of new economics deserves a much more elaborate discussion, because that's, of course, underlies a lot of what we're discussing here. We are here talking about practical solutions within the bounds of what we as individuals can influence. But the broader question of, what is it that the country must aspire for, and what is it that you must sort of really ask and aspire for, I think deserves a completely different session. Hopefully that will happen at a future date. But Bittu, over for you to close with your comments on any of these questions that were asked.
I'll tell you this, that there are solutions in the city of Mumbai. For instance, you get up onto one of these skyscrapers and you look down and you see the largest amount of waste is the roof space. Why aren't we growing food on that? Why aren't we generating power from that? Why aren't we using those as places where we can actually entertain ourselves, not necessarily by blasting sounds, but just being able to walk on our roof? We have to use our resources a little more carefully. And the other thing that I would like to suggest to you as a solution is demand more accountability. If you don't demand accountability, if you don't ask, that means you don't want. So, ये जो मौन व्रत है ना कि भाई हम नहीं करेंगे, don't do that. Be heard. You now have the internet. But for young people, I would like to advise you something, because I am in the departure lounge, So you guys are in the arrival lounge. So if the arrival lounge doesn't give a damn about what I'm doing to the arrival lounge, forget about the departure lounge, well, then you're asking for it. So, but don't ask for it, don't ask for things in a way that insults the elders. That was never in our culture, but you can point out, like we tell children, when somebody drops something over here and says, and a little kid comes, uncle, ye dekho, aapne ye choda, this must be so useful for you, uncle, So we tell children, you have magic eyes, and I'm telling you, you have magic eyes. Speak politely, speak directly, understand the law, be friendly, as he said, but be tough. Don't back down. Somebody says, "Oi, अबे क्या सोचता है तू?" No, मैं सोचता हूँ कि भाई हवा मुझे अच्छी चाहिए, स्वच्छ चाहिए, पानी अच्छा चाहिए. And a couple of misunderstandings. Plastic cannot be recycled. Do not use the word recycling for plastic. It is downcycling. You get something which is what they call virgin plastic, then it gets into something else, it becomes this, it becomes that, it becomes that. After that, it's a landfill or it's the ocean. So you will have to make a U-turn, and there is a transition, and you will have to possibly go back to the same people who are causing the problem and say, look, you did cause this problem, but I'm not judging you, I'm just asking for your help now. I need to do this, what is the best way to do this? So economics will run on solutions. Economics will run on solutions as against what economics used to run on, treating the infrastructures of survival as nothing but raw materials. Whether it was a tree, whether it was a river, it was treated like a raw material, now it's not. So just understand and trust, Bacha Party, just trust a little bit. And you'd be amazed at what you can do if you smile. अगर abuse का अबे ओए तू क्या कर रहा है ओए तो दरवाजा दिखा देंगे before you got your toe in. But you say, यार, Rahul, without you I can't do anything, यार. Give a dog a good name, यार, He won't bite. You have to trust in that. And smile, yeah. Every day smile. Yeah, Rona Dhona won't work, but smile because you've given somebody who never had food a little food. Smile because you've shared a little bit. Smile because you haven't thrown the kachara down. And what my grandson told me is the best advice I ever heard. He said, Nana, you know something? Something you told me when I was only 5, he's now 17 years old. He says, you know, I don't like the sound of the tap running when I'm brushing my teeth. So I said, when the bathroom door is closed, what you do is who you are. So don't do it for him or for me or for anybody. And I'll end with Sorabji, if I may. Very early in my life, 1981, I started a magazine called Sanctuary, and I went to Sorabji, and he said that, first of all, I want to see that you started something. I don't think you have a business plan. Tell me what I can do so that your magazine doesn't shut down. After that, you know what he told me? He says, I know you guys are always fighting, isko band karo, usko band karo. Godrej has a certain ethic. We want to do the right thing. Your job is to make sure that you create enough public opinion so that the right thing is what everybody wants and they articulate it so I can do the right thing. Otherwise, what happens is that the person who's doing the right thing is at a disadvantage in the market. It's a dog-eat-dog market. So you have to articulate what you want. When somebody is doing something wrong, don't sit at home like that. Don't be rude, be honest. And be informed, and do it because you want to do it, not because you heard some guy called Bittu Sahgal or Rahul coming and bahut achhe log hain yaar. Examine, trust, but verify, and that's all I have. I have no other words to say.
If I may take the liberty to wrap this panel up, Bittu, hopeful pessimism is incredible, and I think, and I hope that we all carry that back with us. Another thing that I did want to add is this idea of learning from others' mistakes. And you've been very apologetic for your generation for making a mess and leaving it for us, and I'm going to count myself in the younger generation, but that's a side note. But I think what is also important, as people, we tend to talk about it, but we tend to make our own mistakes to learn from them. I think it's an important point to note that mistakes have been made, but we can move ahead from there, and we can learn from others' mistakes. And both of you, or all three of you, sorry, have been a massive source of inspiration for all of us, and I really hope that we leave this room today emboldened to do some of these things that we've talked about. And it's not just about having conversations, but actually turning them into action in whatever little way that we can. So on that note, a big round of applause to all of you. Thank you so much for being here with us.